Thanksgiving smelled different that year. The turkey's warmth was there, but the air felt heavy, like the house itself knew a storm was coming. I fastened my mother's pearl necklace, the one I wore to every family dinner, and told myself tradition is measured in love, not price. Still, my hands shook. Something in my chest whispered that this would be the night gratitude was tested. Caroline insisted we host at her new place, a glass and marble mansion that gleamed like ice. "Time to modernize our traditions, Mom," she'd said. In her language, that meant everything I stood for should stay in the past. When I arrived, the smiles were tight, the laughter careful. You can hear a secret before anyone speaks it. It lives in the pauses. That's how I knew I no longer belonged at the table I taught them to set. "Mom, I think it's better if you sit in the living room for now," she told me, with a smile that cut deeper than a shout. My son-in-law looked away. The grandchildren pretended not to understand. I steadied myself on the back of a chair and felt the kind of silence that bruises. I had survived lean years, a hard marriage, and long nights alone. I did not expect the hardest thing to be my own child, on a day meant for gratitude. From the couch, I heard forks clink and laughter bounce off the high ceilings. Every giggle landed like a pebble in my shoe, small, irritating, impossible to ignore. I considered leaving, pride first, dignity trailing behind. But an odd calm held me in place. It felt almost like a hand on my shoulder saying, "Stay. There is a reason." Sometimes justice arrives quietly, and the truth needs witnesses. Caroline believed she was setting the rules in her house. She didn't know she was stepping onto a stage I built with years of sacrifice. This dinner would be the last time our family sat together without knowing what was about to change. The will was already signed, sealed, and resting where no one would think to look. And the name on it, the name no one expected, was waiting like a match beside dry wood. I folded my hands and watched the people I love perform politeness around a wound. I could have fought, begged, reminded them who taught them to pray. I chose silence. Not because I was weak, but because silence has a way of making truth louder. They'd learn soon enough that you don't ban a mother from the table she built and walk away full. Caroline wasn't always like that. I still remember the little girl who would sit on the kitchen counter, licking pumpkin pie batter from the spoon, swearing she'd never leave me. Back then, we didn't have much, just laughter, hand-me-downs, and a faith that tomorrow would be kinder. I worked 2 jobs, so she could go to college. Every promotion, every diploma she earned felt like a metal pin to my chest. But somewhere between success and self-importance, my daughter stopped seeing the woman who built her wings and started believing she'd flown on her own. When she married Daniel, things began to change. He came from money, the kind that doesn't look you in the eyes. Their wedding was beautiful, but I noticed how he flinched whenever I spoke about humility or family. Caroline mirrored him soon after. Our Sunday calls grew shorter. Visits turned into formal invitations. The daughter who once shared her secrets now shared her schedule, penciling me in between brunches and business meetings. I didn't blame her at first. Every bird must leave the nest, but I didn't expect her to close the window behind her. I try to keep up. I bought new clothes so I wouldn't embarrass her at the country club. I smiled through dinners where they mocked the simplicity I still lived by. And every time Daniel called me quaint, Caroline laughed, not realizing each giggle chipped away a piece of the woman who taught her to laugh in the first place. Pride doesn't arrive with thunder. It seeps in like fog, quiet and polite, until you can't see where love used to stand. One Thanksgiving years ago, I brought a homemade pie, the same recipe my mother had passed to me. Caroline pulled me aside before I could set it on the table. "Mom, we already have desserts catered. Maybe just leave it in the car, okay?" she said softly, as if kindness could hide humiliation. I nodded, but my heart didn't. I kept the pie on my lap all through dinner, pretending it didn't matter. That was the night I realized my daughter's pride had outgrown her gratitude. People often say time heals, but it doesn't always mend the kind of wounds made by neglect. Sometimes, it only teaches you how to bleed quietly. I stopped bringing pies. I stopped correcting her. I even stopped hoping she'd remember where she came from. Yet deep inside, a quiet part of me refused to vanish, the part that believed lessons unlearned by words would one day be taught by consequences. And that's why I never changed my will back. Years before Caroline's marble mansion, when life still felt small and sacred, I had made a promise to give everything I owned to the one person who had stayed when everyone else turned their back. Caroline didn't know that person existed, but she would, sooner than she thought. The invitation arrived in an envelope far too elegant for its purpose. Cream-colored paper, embossed letters, sealed with gold, like an announcement for royalty. My first thought was that it was a mistake, but when I read the name Caroline Thompson, my heart fluttered, though I knew better than to trust it. It wasn't really an invitation. It was a formality, a gesture to keep up appearances. After all, what kind of daughter would host Thanksgiving without her mother? I held the envelope for hours before opening it again, studying the perfect handwriting that no longer resembled hers. It felt sterile, detached. Caroline had once scribbled me notes on sticky pads with hearts and "Love you, Mom" at the bottom. Now she sent embossed reminders that love must RSVP. I stared at the date, November 24th, and sighed. Something deep inside told me I shouldn't go. But mothers always do, even when they know they're walking into storms. The week before the dinner, I baked. Old habits are hard to kill, and hope is harder. I made her favorite cranberry pie, the one she used to sneak from the oven before it cooled. I wrapped it neatly, knowing she probably had a professional chef preparing every dish. Still, I told myself that one taste might bring her back, if only for a moment, to the kitchen we once shared, to the warmth of a simpler time before ambition built a wall between us. When I called to ask if I should bring anything else, her tone was sharp, clipped. "No, Mom, everything's handled. Just be on time, please." That please wasn't kindness, it was control. I recognized it instantly. My daughter had mastered politeness as a weapon. Every syllable meant something else. Don't embarrass me. Don't speak too much. Don't remind me where I came from. I hung up the phone feeling smaller than my own voice. The night before Thanksgiving, I sat alone in my kitchen, staring at two plates. One for me, one for the memory of what used to be us. I almost didn't go. I almost chose peace over pain. But something in me, the stubborn, unbreakable part of motherhood, refused to let her rewrite the story. I wouldn't be erased so easily. Even if I had to sit in a corner, even if my presence made her uncomfortable, I'd be there. Sometimes love isn't loud. Sometimes it's just the quiet act of showing up when you're no longer wanted. So I pressed my pearls against my neck, slipped on my old dress, and whispered to the empty room, "This time, I won't cry." The truth is, I didn't go for Caroline. I went for the little girl she used to be, the one who once believed that love and gratitude were the same thing. What she didn't know was that this Thanksgiving would remind her of both. When I pulled up to Caroline's house, the driveway alone could have fit my entire old neighborhood. The windows shone like mirrors, reflecting nothing but sky, no warmth, no memory, just perfection carved in glass. I paused for a moment, gripping the steering wheel, feeling the old ache of being out of place. This was her world now. Marble floors, expensive silence, and laughter that came from performance, not joy. I looked down at my cranberry pie on the passenger seat and smiled sadly. It looked so small in such a grand world. The front door opened before I could knock. A woman I didn't recognize greeted me. A housekeeper, young and polite, the kind that avoids eye contact to keep the illusion of invisibility. "Mrs. Thompson will be right with you," she said, leading me through a hallway that smelled of expensive candles and disconnection. Every painting, every flower arrangement seemed chosen to impress strangers, not comfort family. I wondered if Caroline even noticed that the house looked like a magazine, but felt like an apology. When my daughter finally appeared, she looked radiant, flawless hair, elegant dress, a smile so polished it barely touched her eyes.
"Mom."
"You made it," she said, her voice as light as champagne bubbles, insincere and fragile. She kissed the air beside my cheek, careful not to smudge her makeup. "You look lovely," she added, with a pause that said otherwise. I handed her the pie. Thought I'd bring your favorite. She hesitated, then handed it to the housekeeper. We already have plenty of desserts, she murmured. As I stepped into the living room, the noise of conversation faded just enough for people to glance my way, then look quickly elsewhere. Daniel was talking to guests I'd never met, investors maybe, and he gave me a nod that felt like a dismissal. The grandchildren waved timidly, but Caroline shot them a look that froze their little hands midair. It was subtle, but I caught it. Every small act of distance cuts deeper than words. I realized then that I wasn't there to celebrate. I was there to be tolerated. Dinner hadn't even started, yet I felt the air grow colder. Caroline fussed over the table settings, correcting everything I didn't touch. I wanted to tell her that no amount of gold-rimmed plates could replace love. But I kept quiet. Sometimes silence is armor, not surrender. So I smiled, nodded, and let her believe she was in control. Inside, though, something stronger was stirring. Not anger, not sadness, but the calm certainty that the world has a way of balancing debts no one remembers owing. As guests filled the seats, Caroline leaned close and whispered, "Mom, there's not much space at the table tonight. Would you mind sitting in the living room? It's just temporary." My throat tightened. The music, the chatter, the smell of turkey, all blurred together in that moment. But I didn't cry. I looked into her eyes, searching for the little girl I once knew. She wasn't there, so I simply nodded and said, "Of course, darling. I wouldn't want to be in anyone's way." Then I turned, carrying my dignity like fine china, praying not to drop it. The living room was a museum of perfection. Not a single book out of place, not a cushion daring to look lived in. I chose the corner armchair, soft enough to sink into, yet far enough to feel invisible. From where I sat, I could see the reflection of the dining room in the mirror across the hall. I watched them all take their seats, glasses lifted, candles flickering, and for a brief second, I imagined myself among them. Then Caroline's voice broke the illusion. "Let's be thankful for how far we've come," she said. My heart clenched. I had helped her come that far, but I was no longer part of her gratitude. I could hear every sound, the clinking of silverware, the rise and fall of polite laughter, the way Daniel filled the silence with self-importance. "Success is about knowing when to let go of what holds you back," he said, his words floating like smoke. I didn't need to see their faces to know the meaning wasn't lost on anyone. A few guests chuckled. Caroline giggled too, light, effortless, rehearsed. I sat very still, holding my hands together to keep them from trembling. I wondered if anyone at that table knew they were witnessing the funeral of a relationship still breathing. As the minutes dragged on, I caught fragments of conversation. "She still lives in that tiny place, right?" someone asked. Caroline's voice lowered, but not enough. "Yes, she's comfortable there. Simple life suits her." Laughter followed, smooth and cruel. My cheeks burned. That house they mocked was where I'd raised her, where every wall still whispered her name. I could almost hear her younger self, running through the hallway, promising she'd take care of me someday. Promises, like prayers, fade when pride grows louder. I stared at my reflection in the dark TV screen and barely recognized the woman looking back. Her eyes were older, wiser, sadder. But there was strength too, the quiet kind that doesn't need to prove itself. I reached for my purse and touched the edge of the envelope inside. My lawyer had called it the final revision. I called it justice. In that moment, I knew I wasn't angry. I was simply done. Done waiting for appreciation that never came. Done hoping time would soften what ambition had hardened. From the dining room, Caroline's voice rose again, this time in a toast. To new beginnings and the courage to move on. Guests clapped, glasses clinked. I almost smiled at the irony. She thought she was moving on from her past, but the past always finds its way home. And mine was sitting quietly in my lap, sealed and waiting. When the laughter faded and the piano music played softly in the background, I whispered to myself, "One day, you'll understand what you've thrown away." I didn't know then that one day would come sooner than she ever imagined, when a letter she hadn't written would change her life forever. I had been sitting alone for what felt like hours when a small voice broke through the chatter. Grandma? I looked up to see Lily, my youngest granddaughter, standing in the doorway holding a napkin folded like a bird. Her dress was too fancy for her age, her smile too cautious. Mom said you were tired, she whispered. I smiled gently. Did she now? Well, maybe I was, but I'm better now that you're here. She giggled and tiptoed closer, as if being caught talking to me was a secret crime. Lily climbed onto the arm of my chair and whispered, Why are you sitting here alone? Everyone's laughing in there. I looked toward the dining room where laughter spilled through the walls like perfume, sweet but suffocating. Sometimes, I said softly, grown-ups forget that love doesn't need an audience. She tilted her head, trying to understand, her small fingers tracing the pearls at my neck. You look like a queen, she said proudly. I almost laughed. Maybe once, I answered, but queens don't always get a seat at the table. She reached into her pocket and pulled out a small, wrinkled drawing, a picture of our old house. The one with the porch swing and the lilac bush. I drew this for you, she said. My throat tightened. You remembered, I whispered. She nodded. It's still my favorite house. It smells like cookies. I closed my eyes for a moment, inhaling a memory that only she and I still seemed to carry. Thank you, my love, I said. You have no idea how much this means. Just then, Caroline's voice echoed from the hallway. Lily, dinner's not over. Come back here. The girl froze, wide-eyed. I squeezed her hand. Go, darling. I'll be fine. She hesitated, then slipped the drawing into my lap before running off. When she disappeared, the silence returned. But this time, it wasn't empty. It was filled with purpose. That small act of innocence had reminded me why I had done what I did years ago when I rewrote my will. I unfolded the napkin Lily had shaped and found my lawyer's card tucked between its folds. How it ended up there, I'll never know. Perhaps fate wanted to remind me that every decision has its hour. I looked toward the dining room again. Their laughter seemed louder now, hollow and forced. For the first time, I didn't feel pain. I felt distance and with it, peace. That night, I decided the truth would find them soon. Whether through paper, ink, or conscience, justice has a way of sitting at every table, invited or not. I smoothed the card on my knee and whispered to the empty room, Patience, old girl. The storm doesn't come to destroy. It comes to reveal. When the laughter finally began to fade, the sound of plates clinking and chairs scraping across the floor replaced it. The dinner was over. Caroline's perfect event had gone exactly as she planned. Every detail flawless, every emotion rehearsed. I stayed seated in the living room, watching shadows move through the hallway, their joy lingering like the smell of roasted turkey. For a moment, I wondered if anyone would notice that I hadn't eaten. No one did. Caroline appeared in the doorway holding a half-empty wine glass, her expression soft but cautious, the way one might look at an old photograph that stirs too many feelings. Mom, she said, you didn't have to stay so long. I didn't want you to feel uncomfortable. I smiled faintly. Uncomfortable. I repeated, my voice steady. I was just remembering when Thanksgiving meant everyone at one table. Her eyes flickered, guilt or irritation. I couldn't tell. Things change, Mom. People grow. Yes, I said, they do. I let the words hang in the air long enough for her to hear the weight beneath them. She looked away, sipping her wine, as if it could drown the silence between us. You have to understand, she continued, her tone defensive now. Daniel and I, our lives are different. The people here tonight, they're important for his business. You know how it is. I nodded slowly. Of course. Business before family. It's a modern tradition, I suppose. Her shoulders stiffened. That's not fair. I stood, walking closer, my pearls catching the faint light. Fairness left this family the moment you traded love for appearances. She blinked, startled by the calm in my tone. I wasn't angry. Anger had burned out long ago, leaving only clarity. You think distance makes you sophisticated, Caroline, but all it makes you is lonely. The room went still. For the first time that evening, she had nothing to say. I reached for my coat, sliding my purse strap over my shoulder. You know, I said quietly, there's something poetic about gratitude. It always finds its way back home. One day, you'll understand. I didn't wait for her to answer. I simply walked past her, my heels echoing down the marble hallway, each step lighter than the last. I wasn't leaving defeated. I was leaving complete. As I stepped into the cool night, the stars above seemed brighter than they had in years. I felt the envelope in my purse, my last gift, my final lesson. The will was written not in anger, but in truth. Gratitude was never about who said thank you. It was about who remembered why they should. And soon, Caroline would learn that some dinners leave an aftertaste no amount of wine can wash away. Morning light crept through the curtains like an unwelcome guest. Caroline sat at her kitchen island, scrolling through her phone, pretending not to feel the weight of the previous night. Daniel was already dressed for work, his tie perfect, his expression sharper than coffee. That went well, he said casually, pouring himself another cup. Everyone loved the dinner. She smiled faintly, though her reflection in the window looked tired. Yes, it went perfectly, she replied. But the word perfect rang hollow in her mouth. The doorbell broke the silence. Daniel frowned. Who's coming this early? He muttered, walking toward the door. When he opened it, no one was there. Only a large envelope resting on the welcome mat, sealed with an embossed crest. He picked it up, turning it over. It's from Harper and Lane Law Offices, he said, handing it to Caroline. The moment she saw the name, her stomach tightened. That was her mother's lawyer. She tore the seal open, her hands trembling slightly. Inside was a short letter, typed neatly on ivory paper. To Mrs. Caroline Thompson, this letter is to inform you that, as of November 15th, the estate and will of Mrs. Eleanor Hayes have been officially updated. You are requested to be present at our office on December 2nd for the reading of the will. Please bring appropriate identification. Sincerely, Harper and Lane Legal Associates. Caroline blinked, confused. Updated, she whispered. Daniel leaned over her shoulder. Your mother changed her will? When? Caroline shook her head. I don't know. I didn't even know she was working with them again. Her voice trembled despite her effort to sound indifferent. She's been fine, just dramatic sometimes. Daniel shrugged, dismissive. Probably left everything to you anyway. That's what parents do. But Caroline didn't answer. Her mind replayed her mother's calm expression from the night before, the unshakable peace in her eyes, the way she'd said, gratitude always finds its way home. For the first time, those words didn't sound sentimental, they sounded final. As Daniel left for work, Caroline sat alone with the letter, the morning sunlight spilling across the counter like truth itself. She folded the paper slowly and stared out the window. For years, she had built her life on status, appearances, and control. But now, for reasons she couldn't explain, she felt something she hadn't felt in years, fear. Not of losing money or image, but of realizing she might have already lost something far greater. The morning after the letter arrived, Caroline dialed her mother's number 3 times before she even realized what she was doing. Each time, it rang until the machine picked up a soft, familiar voice saying, "If this is family, leave love. If it's business, leave patience." Caroline hung up every time before the beep. She didn't know what to say. Apologizing felt small now, and pretending everything was fine felt impossible. She tried again in the afternoon. Still nothing. The silence on the other end of the line felt heavier than anger. It felt final. So she sent a message instead. Hi, Mom. I got a letter from your lawyer. Can we talk? The screen stayed blank. Minutes turned into hours. She kept glancing at her phone, waiting for the small gray bubbles that never appeared. For the first time, she began to understand how absence could scream louder than words. That night, as Daniel scrolled through emails, Caroline sat on the couch staring at her old family photo on the wall, the one she used to think looked outdated. Her mother was smiling in it, arms around her, both wearing aprons covered in flour. She'd hung it years ago out of obligation, not affection. Now, it seemed to look back at her with quiet judgment. "You're overthinking this," Daniel said without looking up. "It's just legal stuff. She probably wants to make sure things are organized." But Caroline couldn't shake the unease. Her mother's voice echoed in her head. Gratitude always finds its way home. What if this was her way of saying goodbye? What if the will wasn't just about property, but about a message? Something symbolic, something deliberate. Guilt began to twist in her stomach, sharp and cold. She replayed the dinner in her mind, every cruel laugh, every moment she'd chosen pride over love. The following morning, she decided to drive to her mother's house. The road felt longer than she remembered, lined with memories she'd tried to bury. When she finally arrived, the old porch light was still on, flickering like a heartbeat. She knocked once, then again. No answer. She peered through the window. Everything was neat, untouched, quiet. For a moment, panic rose in her throat. Then she saw it, an envelope taped to the door with her name written in her mother's elegant handwriting. Her hands trembled as she pulled it free. On the front, in small, deliberate letters, it read, "For when silence speaks louder than words." She pressed it to her chest, her heart pounding. Inside, something told her, lay not just her mother's message, but her own reckoning. Caroline sat in her car for nearly 10 minutes before she found the courage to open the envelope. The air inside felt too still, too fragile, as if even the wind was waiting. She slid her finger beneath the flap, careful not to tear the handwriting that still smelled faintly of lavender. Inside was a single sheet of paper, folded neatly in thirds, written in ink that wavered slightly, her mother's handwriting, strong but tired. "My dearest Caroline, if you are reading this, it means the silence between us finally grew louder than words. I don't write out of anger. I write because love, when unspoken too long, starts to sound like regret. I want you to know that I never stopped loving you. Even when your laughter felt like a stranger's, even when your pride stood where gratitude once lived, my heart stayed where it always was, at the table you forgot." Caroline's vision blurred as she read. Her throat tightened. She had imagined her mother's anger, her disappointment, but not this gentleness. She took a shaky breath and continued. "There's something you should understand about inheritance. It's not about money or property, it's about memory. You inherit the lessons you honor, and you lose the ones you ignore. I built my life on kindness, on sacrifice, on love that asked for nothing. I hoped you'd carry that forward. Instead, you chose walls where bridges could have been. But I forgive you, my child, because forgiveness is the only gift that doesn't expire." A sob escaped her lips. She covered her mouth, as if the world shouldn't hear her cry. The letter trembled in her hands, but she forced herself to keep reading. "I've changed my will, Caroline, not to punish you, but to remind you that love unappreciated fades when left alone. The house, the savings, the land, all that I built with your father's hands, will go to the person who reminded me what family still means. You've met her, though you may not realize it yet. Her name is Lily." Caroline's breath caught. Lily? Her daughter. Her own child. She still carries what you've forgotten. The warmth of gratitude, the innocence of giving without expecting. She reminded me that love can skip a generation and still survive. I trust you'll understand, one day, that this wasn't about loss, but about return. When you're ready to listen without pride, come home. The door will open for you, even if I'm no longer there to answer it." The paper slipped from Caroline's hands, landing softly on the passenger seat. She stared out at the quiet street, tears streaming freely now. For years, she had built her life to be admired by strangers, only to realize she'd been forgotten by the one person who mattered most. She folded the letter again, slowly, reverently. For the first time in years, she whispered a prayer, not for wealth, or success, or forgiveness, but for a chance to say thank you before it was too late. Caroline drove home in silence, the letter clutched against her chest, as if warmth could seep through the paper. Her reflection in the windshield looked older, softer, like a version of herself she'd left behind years ago. When she reached the driveway, Daniel's car was already there. He was pacing by the door, phone in hand, his voice clipped and impatient. The moment he saw her, he ended the call.
"Finally," he said.
"Where have you been?" She didn't answer right away. Instead, she handed him the letter. "From my mother," she said quietly. He raised an eyebrow. "More drama?" His tone had that careless amusement she used to find charming. She crossed her arms. "Just read it." He unfolded the paper, eyes scanning each line. Halfway through, he snorted. "You're kidding. She left everything to Lily? That old woman's lost it." Caroline's face hardened. "Don't talk about her that way." Daniel looked up, surprised by the edge in her voice. "Come on, Caroline. It's absurd. A child can't inherit directly. It'll go through you anyway. Lawyers will sort it out." He tossed the paper onto the counter like it was junk mail. But Caroline didn't move. Her voice came low, trembling not from fear but from something deeper. She meant it, and I think she knew exactly what she was doing. Daniel poured himself a drink, chuckling under his breath. "Well, if your mother wants to play games, we'll play. I'll call her attorney on Monday." But she wasn't listening. Her gaze lingered on the letter, the familiar loops of her mother's handwriting. Every word burned. Forgiveness is the only gift that doesn't expire. She suddenly felt sick of the marble house, the perfect dinners, the way Daniel's laughter always echoed emptily. "I think she's right," Caroline said softly. Daniel frowned. "Right about what?" She turned to face him. "About what really matters. About what I became." He rolled his eyes. "Oh, not this again. Don't start getting sentimental. It won't change anything." His dismissiveness, once so normal, now sounded cruel. She realized she had built her life beside a man who mirrored her worst parts back at her. Ambition without compassion, success without soul. Without another word, she picked up the letter and walked past him. "Where are you going?" he called.
"To see Lily," she said.
"And to tell her she's just inherited everything I forgot how to value." She paused at the door and looked back. "You always said love was weakness, Daniel. But maybe it's the only thing that ever made me strong." Then she stepped into the night, clutching her mother's words like a compass leading her home. The drive to Lily's school felt endless. The letter sat on the passenger seat, whispering lessons Caroline had never learned. Her hands gripped the steering wheel tighter with every red light, every memory flashing like ghosts along the road, her mother's soft smile, her laughter, her patience. How many times had she missed the chance to simply say, "Thank you"? When she arrived, children were spilling out of the school gates, their backpacks bouncing, their laughter filling the air. She spotted Lily near the steps, her curls shining in the sun, her small hands clutching a crumpled paper. Caroline called her name, her voice cracking more from guilt than distance. Lily turned, hesitated, then ran to her, arms outstretched. "Mommy," she said, breathless. Caroline knelt, catching her, holding her tighter than she had in years. For a moment, she couldn't speak. The scent of her daughter's hair, the same lavender her mother used, flooded her senses. "Grandma came to see me," Lily said suddenly. Caroline froze. "When?" Lily smiled proudly. "Last week. She brought cookies and told me stories. She said I remind her of someone she loves very much." Her eyes sparkled. "Was it you, Mommy?" Caroline's throat closed. She nodded slowly. "Yes, sweetheart. It was." They sat together on a bench near the playground. Caroline pulled the folded letter from her purse. "Lily," she said softly, "Grandma left you something very special. But it's not just a house or money. It's something you can't see, but you can feel." Lily tilted her head, curious. "Like love?" Caroline smiled through tears. "Exactly like love." She handed her the letter, watching her tiny fingers trace the first line. "When you're older, I'll read it to you again. For now, just know she believed in you, and she believed in us." As the afternoon light painted the sky in gold, Caroline realized her mother had been right all along. Gratitude isn't a word, it's a way of living. It's showing up, saying thank you, and keeping love alive even when it hurts. She took Lily's hand and whispered, "Let's go home." But this time, she wasn't talking about a house. She was talking about finding her way back, to family, to forgiveness, and to herself. That evening, as they walked toward the car, Lily looked up and said, "Mommy, Grandma's watching us, isn't she?" Caroline smiled, her heart both breaking and mending at once. "Yes, my love," she said softly. "And this time, I think she's finally proud." 2 days later, Caroline drove back to her mother's house, alone this time. The road was quiet, the trees bending gently under the wind as if bowing in respect. The house stood just as she'd left it, porch light still flickering, curtains drawn halfway, a garden too proud to wilt. It didn't feel abandoned. It felt like it was waiting. She hesitated at the gate, unsure whether she was walking into a home or a confession. When she turned the key, the door creaked the same way it had when she was a child. The air inside was thick with memories, lavender, old books, something baking long ago. She stepped in slowly, tracing her fingers along the hallway wall, where her mother used to mark her height each birthday. The faded pencil lines were still there. Beneath them, written in her mother's delicate script, "She's growing toward the light." Caroline smiled through tears. Her mother had been writing her story all along. The living room looked untouched, as if her mother might return at any moment with tea and questions about her day. On the coffee table sat a single photo frame, Caroline, Lily, and Eleanor together, taken years ago. She picked it up and brushed the dust away, the glass cool against her fingers. For the first time, she didn't see the woman she had disappointed. She saw the woman who had never stopped believing she'd come back. She wandered into the kitchen, the same one she once called too small. Now, it felt infinite, every corner alive with echoes. The old apron still hung by the window, a tiny stain of cranberry pie near the hem. Caroline smiled. "You never threw it away," she whispered. She opened the cupboards and found rows of neatly labeled jars, flour, sugar, cinnamon, and a note tucked between them. It was her mother's handwriting again. "Love is measured, not by what we keep, but by what we give." She sank into the chair by the table, the same one where she'd sat as a girl, swinging her legs and begging for another slice of pie. The weight of everything she'd missed settled quietly around her, not crushing, but cleansing. She understood now. Her mother hadn't left her a house, she'd left her a home, wrapped in forgiveness and memory. Before leaving, Caroline placed the family photo back on the table and set her mother's letter beside it. She wrote her own note on a torn envelope and slipped it underneath. "I finally understand, Mom. Thank you for not giving up on me, even when I gave up on you." Then she turned off the porch light, the one that had always waited for her, and whispered into the quiet, "I'm home now." The law firm sat at the end of Main Street, quiet and severe, its brass letters gleaming in the winter light. Caroline's heels clicked against the marble floor as she walked in, her reflection fractured across polished surfaces. Every sound felt too loud, every breath too heavy. Daniel trailed behind her, his phone in hand, pretending not to care, but she could feel his tension like static in the air. At the reception desk, the secretary looked up. "Mrs. Thompson? They're expecting you." Inside the boardroom, a handful of people waited. 2 lawyers, a notary, and a woman from social services who smiled kindly when Lily entered holding Caroline's hand. The child looked too small for such a serious room. She sat beside her mother, swinging her feet, clutching a small stuffed bear. Caroline placed a steadying hand on her shoulder, though her own pulse raced. Mr. Harper, her mother's attorney, cleared his throat. "We're here to execute the final wishes of Mrs. Eleanor Hayes," he began. Her instructions were specific, and she requested that this reading be attended by both her daughter, Mrs. Caroline Thompson, and her granddaughter, Miss Lily Thompson. He paused, glancing at the envelope before him, as if it carried something sacred. Mrs. Hayes left a personal statement to be read aloud. He unfolded the paper and began. "To those gathered here, I leave not only my possessions but my reasons. What we own is temporary, but what we teach is eternal. I leave my home, my accounts, and all physical assets to my granddaughter, Lily Thompson, under the guardianship of her mother until she comes of age. This is not a punishment. It is a reminder that love, like legacy, must be nurtured to survive. Caroline closed her eyes, tears spilling silently down her cheeks. Daniel leaned forward, ready to interrupt, but the lawyer raised a hand. There's more. To my daughter Caroline, I leave my journals, my recipes, and the key to the kitchen drawer, where she'll find everything she once thought she'd lost. I hope she understands that true inheritance is not what we receive, but what we return. The room was silent except for Lily's small whisper. Grandma's house is mine? Caroline nodded, smiling through her tears. Yes, sweetheart. It's all yours. Daniel shifted uncomfortably, his plans dissolving as quickly as his certainty. When the meeting ended, Caroline lingered. She thanked Mr. Harper, her voice soft but steady. She planned every word, he said kindly. She wanted you to hear it, not just read it. Caroline nodded. She knew I needed to listen this time. As she walked out with Lily's hand in hers, the cold winter air didn't bite as sharply. For the first time in years, she didn't feel small or lost. She felt guided. Her mother hadn't left her behind. She'd left her a path back to everything that mattered. Snow dusted the old porch when Caroline and Lily arrived at the house again, this time not as visitors, but as its new keepers. The key felt cold and familiar in Caroline's hand, like a memory resurrected. She turned it slowly, and the door opened with a sigh, as if the house had been holding its breath, waiting for this moment. Lily ran ahead, her laughter bouncing off the walls, bringing life back to a place that had been sleeping. Caroline followed more slowly, touching the furniture, the walls, the air itself, as though apologizing with every step. Everything was just as she'd left it. The scent of lavender, the worn rug by the door, the quiet hum of a clock that had outlived its maker. It feels like Grandma's still here, Lily said, her voice soft with wonder. Caroline smiled. Maybe she is, sweetheart. Maybe in her own way. She never left. She walked into the kitchen and saw the drawer her mother had mentioned in the letter. Her hands trembled as she reached for the handle. The wood groaned slightly as it opened. Inside were her mother's old recipe cards, a locket, and a small notebook tied with a faded ribbon. On top of them sat a folded note addressed in that unmistakable handwriting. For my Caroline, when she's ready. Caroline unfolded it carefully, her breath catching at the first line. If you're reading this, it means you finally came home. Not to my house, but to your heart. I never wanted to teach you through loss, but sometimes love needs silence to be heard. Everything in this drawer is yours, not because of what you've done, but because of who you can still become. Beneath the letter was a single photograph, Caroline as a child, standing beside her mother, both covered in flour, laughing so hard the picture itself seemed alive. On the back, written in blue ink, "The day we burned the pie, but not the love." Caroline pressed it to her chest, the tears coming freely now. Lily climbed onto her lap. "Mommy, what's in there?" she asked. Caroline smiled through her tears. "Everything we forgot to say, thank you for." She lifted Lily's hand and helped her place the locket around her neck. "This was Grandma's," she whispered, "and now it's ours." The little girl smiled, clutching it tight. In that moment, Caroline felt something shift inside her. Not grief, not regret, but release. Her mother's forgiveness had always been waiting. She had simply needed to open the right drawer to find it. That night, as snow fell softly outside, Caroline and Lily baked a pie together, laughing when the crust burned slightly at the edges. "It smells like Grandma," Lily said, giggling. Caroline smiled. "It smells like home." And for the first time in her life, she finally knew what that meant. Spring arrived slowly, melting winter's silence into birdsong. The house began to breathe again. Every day, Caroline and Lily filled its rooms with life, painting walls, planting flowers, baking pies that never seemed to burn quite right. The place no longer felt like a monument to regret. It was becoming a promise reborn. But one morning, While sorting through the attic, Caroline noticed a loose panel behind an old cedar chest. Something about it felt deliberate, like her mother had left one more breadcrumb to follow. She knelt down and pried the wood gently away. Behind it was a small tin box wrapped in cloth, the kind her mother used to store recipes or keepsakes. Dust floated in the sunbeam as she lifted it free. Inside, there were a few folded notes, a silver ring, and a small cassette tape labeled in elegant cursive, "For when you're finally listening." Caroline stared at it for a long moment before realizing she still had her mother's old tape player in a kitchen drawer. She brought it downstairs, hands trembling. Lily watched with wide eyes. "Is it from Grandma again?" Caroline nodded. "I think so, sweetheart." She pressed play. The tape crackled, then her mother's voice, soft, clear, achingly familiar, filled the room. "If you've found this, Caroline, then you've already opened the drawer, and that means my lesson worked. But there's one more thing I wanted you to know. I never meant for gratitude to feel like guilt. I only wanted you to understand that love isn't something we earn, it's something we return. Don't spend your life paying debts that love already forgave. Just live kindly, and teach Lily to do the same." The voice paused, a quiet sigh following. "You were never a disappointment. You were simply unfinished. But now you're whole." The tape clicked to a stop, and the house seemed to hold its breath again. Caroline covered her mouth, tears spilling freely. Lily climbed into her lap and whispered, "She sounds like she's right here." Caroline nodded, pressing her forehead against her daughter's. "She is, darling. She always will be." That night, Caroline placed the tin box back into the wall, sealing it with a note of her own. "For Lily, when she's ready." The circle was complete. Generations intertwined through lessons whispered in wood, ink, and forgiveness. The house didn't feel haunted anymore, it felt alive. And for the first time, as Caroline watched her daughter sleep beneath the same roof her mother once prayed under, she finally understood. Gratitude wasn't about saying thank you. It was about becoming the kind of love worth thanking. Years passed like soft rain, quietly reshaping everything it touched. The old Hayes house was no longer a relic. It was a home alive with laughter, footsteps, and music. The lilac bush in the yard bloomed bigger each spring, as if Eleanor herself still tended to it. Inside, Lily had grown into a young woman with the same light in her eyes her great-grandmother once saw in Caroline. She had inherited not only the house, but something far rarer, the peace that comes from understanding where love begins. One late afternoon, while sorting through a box of keepsakes, Lily found the tin wall panel her mother had once mentioned. The old cassette tape was still inside, along with her grandmother's letters, yellowed at the edges, but whole. "Mom," she called, her voice trembling slightly. "Is this the box Grandma left you?" Caroline looked up from the stove, smiling softly. "Yes, my love. That's the one." She wiped her hands and joined her daughter at the table. "She left me her words, so I wouldn't lose myself. And maybe she left them for you, too." Lily slid one of the letters out and read aloud. Her grandmother's words filled the kitchen once again. "Love isn't something we earn, it's something we return." She paused, eyes glistening. "She was right," Lily whispered. "I feel like she's still teaching us." Caroline nodded, her gaze warm and steady. She never stopped. Her lessons just changed form. First it was pie recipes, then letters, then us. She touched her daughter's cheek. We became her message. The two of them spent the evening reading through the old notes, laughing between tears. Each word seemed to glow in the golden light of sunset. When they reached the end, Lily folded the last page carefully and said, "You know, Grandma wasn't just writing to you. She was writing to whoever came next." Caroline smiled, her heart swelling. "Then it's your turn to keep the story alive." That night, after Lily went to bed, Caroline stood by the window, looking at the stars over the lilac bush. The house was quiet again, but not empty. Every wall, every floorboard, every whisper of wind carried traces of love returned. She realized then that her mother had never truly left anything behind. She had simply planted it deep enough to keep growing long after she was gone. And in that stillness, Caroline whispered into the dark, "We heard you, Mom. And we'll keep listening." Time, as always, moved in quiet circles. Seasons changed, laughter deepened, and the old Hayes house became a sanctuary not just of memories, but of beginnings. Lily, now a grown woman, sat at the same kitchen table where her grandmother once wrote her final words. The light of a late summer afternoon spilled across the wood, illuminating the faint scratches left by generations of hands. On the counter, a pie cooled, the scent of cranberry and cinnamon weaving through the air like a familiar hymn. She opened a notebook, its cover worn, its pages soft, and began to write. Her pen moved slowly, deliberately, as if guided by invisible hands. "My dear child, by the time you read this, the world will have changed again, as it always does. But I want you to know that you come from a long line of love that sometimes stumbled, but never stopped trying. Your great-grandmother taught us that gratitude is more than a word. It's a bridge between mistakes and forgiveness. Your grandmother taught me that it's never too late to cross it." Lily paused, smiling faintly. She could almost hear Caroline humming in the next room, the same tune Eleanor used to sing when baking. "One day, you'll face your own storms. When you do, remember, love isn't perfect, but it endures. It's patient even when pride isn't. It forgives even when silence lasts too long. That's the inheritance I leave you, not the house, not the garden, but the courage to love even when it hurts." She folded the letter neatly, slipping it into an envelope marked "For when you're ready." Then she tucked it inside the same tin box that had once held Eleanor's voice and Caroline's tears. For a moment, she just stared at it, realizing how time had turned a single act of love into a legacy that refused to die. As dusk settled, Lily stepped outside and placed the box beneath the lilac bush, the same one her great-grandmother had planted decades ago. The blossoms swayed gently in the wind, scattering petals like blessings. "It's safe now," she whispered, "and it will keep growing." When she looked up, the first star blinked in the twilight sky. Somewhere between the fading light and the quiet of the earth, she felt it, the presence of the women who had come before her. Their love was no longer a memory. It was the air itself. And as she turned to go inside, she smiled, knowing that what began as a secret at Thanksgiving had become something eternal. The house buzzed with warmth again, the way it once had in Eleanor's time. The scent of roasting vegetables and pie crust filled every corner, and sunlight poured through the wide kitchen windows, turning the air golden. Lily, now grown and married, stood at the head of the long oak table, her grandmother's table, carefully arranging place cards. Each one bore the name of someone she loved, written in her own looping handwriting. She paused over one final card, the simplest of all, Eleanor. She placed it at the head of the table, beside a small vase of lilacs. Caroline, older now, moved more slowly, but still carried grace in every motion. She watched her daughter work and smiled. "You've done her proud," she said softly. Lily turned, her eyes bright. "I just want everyone to feel what she gave us." Caroline nodded, touching her shoulder. "She's here, you know. Every time we love each other the way she taught us, she's right here." They stood in silence for a moment, the hum of the oven and the faint crackle of the fire filling the space with peace. When guests began to arrive, family, friends, neighbors, the house came alive with laughter. The dining room shimmered with candlelight, and the lilacs seemed to glow faintly in the evening air. Before anyone took their seats, Lily lifted her glass. "Before we eat," she said, her voice steady but full of emotion, "I'd like to read something." She unfolded a small, aged piece of paper. Eleanor's words, the same ones her grandmother had once written. "What we own is temporary, but what we teach is eternal." A hush fell over the room. Caroline's eyes glistened, and for a heartbeat, she could almost see her mother at the table again, smiling, proud, radiant in her quiet way. Lily continued, "3 generations of women taught me that gratitude isn't about saying thank you, it's about living in a way that deserves it." She looked toward her mother, her voice trembling. "Tonight, we're not just having dinner. We're continuing a promise. As they began to eat, conversation and laughter rose like music. Caroline caught Lily's gaze from across the table, and for a moment, both women felt something larger than time move between them. Outside, the wind rustled through the lilac bush, scattering a few petals that floated gently against the window pane. When the meal ended and everyone had gone, Lily lingered alone in the quiet. She touched her grandmother's place card and whispered, "We kept your seat, Grandma, and we always will." Then she blew out the last candle, leaving the room bathed in soft starlight, a light that had traveled through generations to find its way home. Years later, the Hayes house stood quiet under a soft evening sky. The lilac bush had grown wild, its blossoms spilling over the fence like laughter too full to contain. Children's voices echoed faintly from inside, mingling with the hum of an old record player spinning a tune that once filled these same rooms when Eleanor was alive. The house had changed hands 3 times, but its heart had never left. Caroline, now gray-haired and gentle-eyed, sat on the porch wrapped in a quilt. Lily stood beside her, cradling her newborn daughter, the 4th generation of women bound by love, loss, and forgiveness. "She looks just like Grandma Eleanor," Lily whispered, smiling through tired eyes. Caroline nodded, tears glinting softly. "Then she'll grow strong," she said. "Strong enough to forgive, strong enough to remember." Inside, on the kitchen wall, hung 3 framed letters. One from Eleanor, one from Caroline, and one from Lily. Each carried a piece of the same truth written differently. Love isn't something we own, it's something we keep passing forward. The house, bathed in golden afternoon light, seemed to breathe those words. Even in stillness, it pulsed with the quiet rhythm of gratitude. As dusk fell, Lily placed her baby's tiny hand against the wood of the old kitchen table. "This is where it all began," she murmured. 3 women, 1 lesson. Caroline smiled faintly, her voice low and steady. "And 1 promise, that no one at this table will ever sit alone again." Outside, the wind rustled the lilac branches, scattering petals that floated like blessings through the open window. The record faded, the house sighed, and for a moment, time itself seemed to bow in reverence. 3 generations had learned the same truth in 3 different ways, that love, when tended with patience, becomes eternal. And as night embraced the old house once more, a single phrase lingered in the air like a prayer that had finally come home. "Thank you."